do I know if it's recording? It is recording. Okay. Okay, we're good. All right. So this will be like, I don't know if I'll do this every week, but I do kind of have like a lecture. Kind of like a lecture. So I'm calling this the Digital Drawing Bootcamp. We're going to kind of go through everything that you need to know to succeed in this class very quickly, although it'll be recorded so you can go back to it. So number one, I have a video that I think is a pretty good intro to scientific illustration. I don't want to re-give that lecture. If you want to watch that, it's called Heuristics of Scientific Illustration. Here's a link. I will put it in the Discord. Maybe. You can watch. Oh, that's weird. I don't know if that actually worked. Anyway, you can watch that later if you want to. Also, there's a YouTube playlist. You don't have to watch YouTube videos. It's up to you. I don't care either way, but everything that I have ever described and will describe in this class has already been documented, and there's a video for it on the YouTube playlist. So if there's some technique that you don't know how to do, or you feel like you missed it, go to the YouTube playlist and you'll be able to find a video for it, likely. The other thing I'll just say about YouTube is like the most amazing learning experience you could ever find on the planet Earth. So if there's something you want to learn, I might not know how to teach it. So you can use YouTube to find Photoshop tactics that will teach you something that maybe nobody else in the class knows how to do. So I would encourage you to utilize those resources. Okay. Let's talk about Photoshop basics. So pixel versus vector. This is the first thing to understand. Okay, so let's see. I'm just trying to think of how much detail I go into. Okay, so a pixel image is essentially in the computer set up as a grid system. Okay, and the image is constructed by each of these grids. These grid pieces, which is called a pixel, is filled in with some color, right? Okay, that's a pixel. And the number of pixels is the resolution. Okay, so pixel-based images and programs like Photoshop are manipulating the pixels. So what Photoshop will do is you can go in and you can actually change individual pixels to a different color. That's a pixel-based program. That is Photoshop. This is good for photography and good for certain aspects of scientific illustration. I like to digitally draw in Photoshop much better than in Illustrator. So I also like digital drawing in Photoshop. But understand that that is what's happening in the computer system. A vector-based image system, which is like Illustrator, is based on mathematics. So when you draw a line, there's probably some formula for that line that the computer can understand as mathematics, and it can determine a thickness to the line, a curve to the line, etc. And so it's sort of defined by mathematics, is the vector system. Okay, and the difference between the pixel and the vector system is that the pixel images have trouble being resized. Because if you take a pixel-based image and you make it really big and you blow it up, what happens to the image? It will lose quality. So it'll look terrible. It'll look blurry. Okay. If you take a vector image and you resize it, you make it bigger or smaller, it'll still look equally good because it's based on mathematics. Okay. These look very differently. As we go through the class, you'll be able to look and you'll be able to tell by eye what's a pixel image, what's a vector image. They look completely different. Okay. And you'll start to get a sense of, well, why would you use a vector? Why would you use a pixel? For now, just understand that there are these differences. And Illustrator, that's the .ai files. Those are the vector ones. But to start, we'll be using the pixels. Okay. So we covered that. Okay, open file and save. So everybody should open Photoshop. And you should be able to, let's see if I close this. You should be able to open up a new file. Okay, so click New File. This is what you should see. You should see something like this. Okay, so once you see this, there's a couple settings that are kind of quite important for this class. Most of the stuff in this class I want set to a specific size. I kind of care a lot about making sure that everybody's kind of not look the same, but are in the same format so we can compare. Okay, so when you set up a file, I'm going to give you a size of inches for the height and the width. So a normal standard sheet of paper is 8 width and 11 height. That's a common setting that you might put within this setting up a new file, okay? The next thing that's very important is this resolution. So 72 resolution, that's how many pixels per inch, I think. 72 is very, very low. That's a terrible resolution. Most of the stuff that we're going to do in this class is 300, what's called dots per inch, 300 DPI, okay? That's how many pixels. If you go to 600, your eye will not even be able to tell the difference, but it will slow your computer down, okay? So there would be rare situations where you want to go to 600, but not in this class. So in this class, everything you can do at 300 resolution. Other things you might fiddle with, so there's color mode. I never change this. I always leave it as RGB. So red, green, blue, that's color for the internet. All the internet colors are based on values of red, green, and blue. So that's what RGB means. CMYK, if you were going to do something that was going to be printed, the printers use CMYK color systems. So you might, if you're trying to optimize the print so that what you have on the computer exactly matches what comes off in the printer, you'd probably use CMYK. Everything in this class is going to be RGB. So these are the only things you need to fiddle with is the size and the DPI, okay? So everybody should be able to open up a file that's 8 by 11, 300 DPI, create, you should have a blank page, okay? Hopefully, are there any questions about that? Okay. Okay, one of the most common mistakes that people do right away, newbies, is they immediately open up a file and they start drawing on the base layer. They make a mark on the base layer. Don't do that. Okay, so let me talk about layers. Okay, so the way that Photoshop works, and Illustrator, and Premiere Pro, and essentially every software system that deals with images on computers uses this layer system. So the layer system is that the computer creates a stack of layers, okay, like this. So here is 1, 2, 3, 4 layers. And you can imagine these as like transparencies, like transparent overhead things that you could stack on each other. And you can put marks on each layer. So let's say you had a layer that was holding like a guy. And you could put underneath that a layer that was holding a tree that was drawn on layer 3. And maybe underneath that you have a layer 2 that's holding like the background. Maybe this is actually the desert and that's a saguaro. And then so maybe the base layer just has white. Okay. Let me ask a question, which is, what is the advantage to being able to do this? Why not just draw everything on one flat plane? What was said was you can move the layers, so you could select this man and you could move him to the left or to the right, and you would not have to fiddle with the green or the mountains, whatever in the background. So it allows you to separate things, treat things differently. It gives you much more freedom, and it also allows you to experiment. So let's say you have a perfect image and you think, am I done or am I not done? I would like to see what it would look like with the sun. You can add a new layer, layer 5, and you can create a sun on layer 5, and you can say, well, maybe I like that. Great, that was a good experiment. Or maybe if you hate that, you can say, oh, I don't like that. Let me delete layer 5. And then that goes back to the original image and you didn't mess up your image. So you have incredible power on the computer in that if you were doing this with like a painting on a canvas or a drawing on a paper, the mark is in some sense permanent. Painting you can always paint over, but it's still a lot of work. With Photoshop, you have infinite experimentation. So if you're ever going to try something new, just add a layer. You can experiment on it, okay? So let's now show you how to set up a layer. And as I said, one of the most common problems is people draw on the base layer. Don't ever draw on the base layer. Leave the bottom layer white or black if you're going to be drawing on black. Okay, so to set up a layer, you do layer, new, layer. Okay, okay? And there should be a window of layers. Let's see if I can, oh, where'd it go? I made it disappear. Here it is. So so Photoshop is very complicated. There's a ton of crap. You might accidentally press a button that messes it up. It still happens even for me, and I've been working with Photoshop now for maybe 15 years, maybe even more. Anyway, it's complicated. Here is the window for your layers. And you can see that I just created layer 1. You can give these layers names. So if I didn't want to call it layer 1, maybe I want to call this mountains, right? And then I can draw the mountains on the mountain layer. Now, a couple things that you should do with layers while you're experimenting. You can turn them on and off by clicking the eyeball. You can lock the layer by pressing this button, which means that nothing can touch or destroy or manipulate this layer anymore. Another common newbie problem is people will come and ask me and they'll say, I can't do anything. It's not making any marks. And I'll say, oh, it's because your layer's locked. Okay. So make sure you understand layer locking, unlocking, and shutting on and off layers. The other thing I do all the time for experiments is you can change the opacity of a layer. So maybe you want to make it see-through. So this is making those layers actually see-through. So oftentimes we'll make some sketches and you might want to make that sketch see-through so that you can draw over top of it. Okay, that's legal. That's a good idea. You should do that. Don't take a image from the internet, make it see-through, and then trace over top that. Don't do that. But you can do sketches, etc. So these are common things that I do with layers. I would encourage you to, every time you're going to try something new, like maybe, oh, I'm adding the eyes. Now I'm adding the legs. You should create a layer for that, and you should try to organize your layers, okay? After you create the layer, they can be moved. So here I'm actually moving the order of the layer. Orders of the layers is very important, and you'll kind of get a sense of it as we go through the semester. You'll get more and more comfortable with the layers. Okay, are there any questions about layers? Okay, you can also easily just delete a layer by right-clicking and hitting delete layer, etc. Okay. How did I get what? So it was over here. If you literally don't have it, you can go to Window and click Layers. And that'll make it pop up. If it's checked, it means it's already popped up and you have to find it somewhere on your screen. Does that make sense? So another key thing in Photoshop that happens all the time is there's a ton of like toolbars. Layers is one toolbar. Brushes is one toolbar. These can all be turned on and off with this windows. The window means like you're opening up the window to look at these features. Okay, so keep that in mind. All right. Okay, layering detail. What I mean by that is the strategy for Photoshop is you want to progressively make your drawings more and more detailed by adding layers over top of layers. So your drawings are going to look very simple at first, and you're going to be adding and layering detail, okay? And as you get more and more layers, your drawing will get more complex and it will look better and better probably. You can also merge layers. So let me just show you that. If you have two layers and you want to merge them together, you can just hit right click and you can say merge down and it will now merge those layers. So you can merge layers. If you're working with hundreds and hundreds of layers, that's bad. You probably want to merge some layers and reorganize. So layers can always be reorganized, but once you merge a layer, that's it. Merged, it's flattened, okay? So I should also say to flatten an image means to get rid of all the layers. That means it's flat. You can't edit it anymore. So don't ever flatten your image and then save it flattened because that's it. It's done. Okay? So I always save my images unflattened. The only reason I ever flatten an image is if I'm going to save it as like a JPEG and I need to flatten it for whatever reason. Okay. That's flattening layers. Okay, let's talk about marks and size. So the other thing you're going to want to learn about Photoshop is the hotkeys. Okay, so all the buttons on the keyboard can do something. It's going to take you a while to learn them, but they're very helpful if you learn them. One of the key buttons that I press all the time is B. B is the brush tool. Okay, so the brush tool, quick, I guess, review of the brush tool. There's many different brushes. Okay, so in the brush tool, if I'm right clicking, there's general brushes, dry media. Oh no, what happened? Oh, okay. Dry media brushes, wet media brushes, many different kinds of brushes. You can make your own brushes. The key things you need to know to start is the difference between a soft brush and a hard brush. Okay, so here's a soft brush, and this one was drawn by a hard brush. What's the difference? What do you see when you make those marks? What's the difference? Yeah, these edges are sharp. This edge is fuzzy. So the soft brush is going to be used for realism, making things look real in some sense, if you're using it correctly. The hard edge brush is going to be used more for drawings, okay? So keep that in mind. One of the most common mistakes that just makes things look terrible is somebody will try to make a drawing with a soft brush and it'll look just disgusting. don't do that unless you have like extra skill and you know what you're doing. So I would start with a hard brush. The other thing to get a sense of is that there are pressure sensitive brushes. Okay. So if you were intelligent and you got the digital drawing pad, you should be able to select a pressure sensitive brush where you can push harder and it creates a fat line, or push lighter and you can get light lines. Okay. You're going to want to get used to this. You're going to want to practice this, being able to press hard and light and be in control of your lines. Okay. So you're going to want to get used to those. Those are the two things that I use the most: pressure sensitive brushes and the difference between soft brushes and hard edge brushes. Okay. The other thing, you can control the opacity of your brush. So if you turn the opacity down, you're drawing with essentially a less percentage of black, or whatever the color is, you're drawing with a less percentage of that. So here I'm drawing with 35% black, which is some gray. Here I'm drawing with 5% black, which is a very, very light gray. Here I'm drawing with 74% black, which is almost indistinguishable from actual full black. Okay. These are the things I adjust all the time. The final thing I'll describe is the smoothing. So I don't use the smoothing often, except on the neon light challenge. The smoothing, if you turn that up, it makes your lines less jagged. It'll make your lines a little bit smoother. So if you want to draw kind of like a super smooth line, whereas if you're drawing kind of like more organic stuff, maybe you want kind of stuff like this. In this case, you'd turn the smoothing down. If you want something like this, you'd turn the smoothing up. Okay. So those are key things about brushes. Are there any questions about marks or those brushes? I have a video on how to make custom brushes, but I'm not going to go over that now. We went over smoothing. Okay, step forward, step back. So in Photoshop, again, one of the powers of drawing with digital drawing is that you have infinite erasability. You can step forward into the future and in backwards. So there's a hotkey for stepping back, which on my computer, it's Control Z. I use this all the time. So I can step back almost infinite steps, almost infinite, not completely infinite. I can step back and go back in time. So if you make a mistake, let's say you're drawing some person and you're like, oh, I want to draw a hat, and you didn't like that hat. You can just step back and try it again. Oh, I didn't like that one. Let me try again. I'll do a baseball hat. Oh, I like that. Okay. What I do, I press Control Z. On some computers it's different, but the term to search for is step back. You want to find the hotkey for step back. I use that again all the time. When you're drawing, the difference between drawing with a pen on paper is that if you're drawing with a pen on paper, every mark is final. That's it. You put a mark on the paper. In Photoshop, it is not like that. In Photoshop, you put a mark and you decide, do I like that mark or not? And if you don't like that mark, you step back and you try again. Did I like that mark? Yes, keep it. No, step back. Okay, get used to that. That's how you draw with Photoshop. You step back. And if you step back too far, you can step forward. That's control. For me, that's Control Shift Z. So I get real used to stepping back and stepping forward, step back, step forward, and you'll get a real good flow, and you'll be able to test and experiment with the actual marks that you're making much more efficiently than on any other medium that you could ever do in art. So that's one of the sort of like the superpowers of learning how to draw digitally. Okay, are there any questions about that? Okay. Saving files. So I'll demo how to save a file here. You'll want to learn this because you're going to have to save some files today. So when you're done with your file, you like your drawing, whatever, you're going to turn it in, or time is up. File, save as, and this complicated screen will come up. Well, maybe it's not too complicated. Okay, remember you'd want to name it first name, last name, assignment. Let's say test 1 drawing, etc. Now, the options that are important are the file type. So mostly I'll be asking you to save as a .psd, which is a Photoshop file. A PSD file can be opened by any Photoshop program, and you can re-access the layers and you can re-edit and you can continue working. So if you save it as a Photoshop file, it's kind of like saving it in a state that you can come back to and you can continue working. So most everything should be saved as a .psd. The only other thing that might be useful is if you flatten your image, so layer flatten, You can save it as a JPEG. JPEGs are just a standard sort of like flattened file. Sometimes that's useful. You probably will not be saving many JPEGs in this class. The other thing that might be useful for you sometime in your future is a .png file. Let's see, a PNG file is a file where the white space is made clear. That's often very useful for t-shirts. Not used in this class, but just FYI. So Photoshop kind of has infinite sort of like saving power. You can save it as different file types, but stick to the PSD for this class. Are there any questions about saving files or file types? All right, we made it through that. Now the fun begins, I think, maybe. Okay, now let's talk about drawing. So I always debated whether or not I should do this. I have in the past, last 5 years, I never did sort of like a drawing workshop. I never did it because I always kind of think really the only way to learn how to draw is to practice. That's really the only way to learn. But then I kept getting complaint after complaint about complaint, like, oh, I need to teach more techniques. Okay, so I'm happy to teach techniques, so I'm gonna try to do that. So let me first just talk about basics of drawing, because many people have never. Let me actually ask, who's drawn before, or like actively drawn? Yeah. So there's essentially like 3 people. Okay, who would say that they don't actively draw? Okay, so lots of people. So okay, so again, this is worth it. I draw every single day. Every single day I draw something. Okay. So I've been drawing every single day now for many, 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 many years. So the first question you might have if you're starting to draw that might be very intimidating is like, well, what do I draw? Okay. So the answer to that is you start with parts. Start with discrete items. So let me give you an example of this. This is an artist, Japanese artist, Hokusai. He's actually the artist who created manga. So manga in Japan actually originally meant like just sort of like random drawings of stuff. And so he created these books of sort of like random drawings of things. And really what they were training manuals for artists for how to draw these things, how to draw these different things. So here is him drawing some different birds, okay, or the same bird, but in different poses. Here's him drawing different poses of women and grandmothers and grandfathers, etc. Okay. So what I would suggest to you is that if you're trying to decide like, well, what do I draw? Just think of items. Like, well, what's your favorite item? What's your favorite food? What's your favorite tool? What's your favorite object? Just draw objects. Okay. Objects. Don't force yourself. If you're starting to draw, do not force yourself to draw a composition. Okay. Let me show you the difference between a composition. Here's a composition. This is a composition. There are many, many, many discrete items in here. Here's an hourglass. Here's a horse, another horse, a spear, a helmet, armor, a dog, a skull, a castle in the background. That's many discrete objects. Don't start by trying to draw something like this. Don't do that to yourself. You'll hate yourself. What you want to do is when you first start, you want to pick discrete, simple objects that you like. Maybe you like hammers or chainsaws. Draw one of those. Or a beer can, something simple, pack of cigarettes, etc. Discrete objects. Then once you've built up enough skill where you can draw discrete objects, then you start putting them together in compositions. Okay. So if you've never drawn before, that's how you should think about like how to draw. What should you draw? Things you love. That's how Andy Warhol got famous. He just made images of things that he loved and everybody loved. And because he did that, that's one reason why he became very famous. Okay, so we can do an activity. First activity. So the first activity is to draw a small item in 3 orientations. So everybody spend 1 minute picking whatever item you're going to draw, and you're going to open up a Photoshop file, and you're going to draw that item as best you can in 3 distinct poses. So from 3 different angles. Okay, you're going to get 10 minutes to do this. And then we're going to upload this to the folder, which is small item in 3 orientations. Okay. You can use a reference photo if you want, or you can draw from your brain. So let's see. I will set a timer for 10 minutes. And I'll turn on the music a little bit. All right, 10-minute timer is going. One object, same object, 3 different angles. Question asked. The brush. So one reason is because you're dealing with math. I have a right click. So can you activate a right click on this Mac? Yeah, there you go. There's your option.
Last time I took a look, how many national parks did I have in this week?
E is the eraser. That's the other thing you're going to want to use a lot. The eraser is just a brush that erases. So it's the same as a brush tool, essentially.
Summer. Wait, we need to finish school shopping. We've done this. Target has $5 lunch boxes. And now new lower prices on the kids' favorite Goody Gatter snacks. And we're done. Now, When it comes to finishing your supply list, Target has your back to school.
What? Question, ask. Y'all have 4 minutes left. That's because you're on the base layer. What are you trying to do, right? So you're erasing right now. You have the eraser selected. That's the eraser. You're actually erasing the base layer. So step back in time. You need to create a new layer so you're not on the bottom layer. But that's what I said is the most common mistake of newbies. Don't draw on layer 0. So create a new layer, and then you got to select the brush tool and draw on a second layer. Try not to touch the bottom layer. Okay, you got to move quick. You got 3.5 minutes left. Let it rip. Two and a half minutes. Two minutes. One and a half minutes. One minute. Thirty seconds. When you're done, you can save it as a PSD and upload it. This is the 3 items. Oh, and I suppose I should have covered this, but if you were wondering if you needed a base file, that was the original blank setup. All right, that's time up. So everybody needs to stop this activity wherever you're at, stop where you're at, and upload the file that you have. This is not going to be like if you only made a little bit of progress. I'm not going to like give you like a 0. This is just like we're gauging where everybody's at. We'll look at these later. But you're going to have to sort of get used to this where we're going to kind of like do speed warm-ups like this. Let's see. Okay. We did this. All right, as you guys are uploading this, okay. So the next thing that we're going to work on is form sketching. So just to be clear, I'll say once more, I probably should have said it before. What you were supposed to start with was if you download this file called blank setup, that's what you want to start with in the Photoshop. It's just an 8x11 file. That's what all these examples are going to be drawn in. So everybody's using an 8x11. Oh, and we're only using black and white now, no color. We need to get fluent with color, or with black and white, excuse me. Okay, while everybody's uploading those, so the next thing that we're going to do is form sketching. So you're going to have to do 10 poses. You're going to have 10 minutes to do 10 poses, okay? You want to do one pose every minute. So sketching is very, very, very important in art. And many people who can't draw, the problem is that they don't sketch. They think that the reason that they can't draw is because they try to make a mark and their first mark should be the final mark. That's incorrect thinking, okay? What happens in drawing is you make a sketch and then you either draw over top the sketch or trace over the sketch, okay? So you are drawing is a process, and the first step of the process is to sketch. And what you're going for when you sketch is you're going for proportion. You're trying to arrange the piece, the composition. When we're doing form sketching, so that's people. So you're going to try to sketch people in as much detail as you can. You don't have to, this is kind of like expert quality, like form sketching. This is pretty expert. This is just stick figures. Everybody can draw stick figures, okay? So think about that. Let's see. The goals for this are going to be proportion, orientation, and pose. And when you're dealing with humans, you're also dealing with emotions. So you want to kind of express emotion. Let's see. Let me just demo some quick sketching so people get a sense of. So there's different ways to sketch. If I'm sketching people, if I'm sketching a man, I kind of do a triangle for the top. I do a head. I do arms. Arms have the top part, bottom part, hands. If I'm doing a man, I'll do kind of like a triangular hip. And then I'll do a knee and then feet. So this is kind of like a quick form sketch for a man. If you're doing a woman, I typically do lots more circles. Something like this. Something like that. Okay. So if you just want to do stick figures, you can do that. Whatever. Or depending on your level of quality or skill, you can form sketch however you want. Is there any questions about how to do the form sketching? Again, we're just practicing here. Okay. So now everybody should open up a new blank thing. So, or you could start by saving it as your form sketch. I'm going to clear my page. I can do that by just deleting my layers. Create a new layer. Okay, so we're going to have 10 minutes for 10 poses. Are there any questions about that? All right, here we go. Sketching does not have to be clean. It can be sloppy. Seven minutes. Five minutes. 3 minutes. Two minutes. One minute. This is the form sketch. Form sketch. If you question what you should name it, you can look at the folders. Form sketching. So I just labeled it form sketch. All right, that's it. So save what you got, upload it to the form sketch, and I'll start talking about the next one we're going to do. Okay, so the next type of sketching, this is common for tattoo artists who want to do kind of like a freehand tattoo. So this is called sketching. I'm calling this sketching over top, light to dark. It's a common process where what the artist will do is first do a sketch with a very, very light color. Okay, so I will permit color under this occasion. You can change the color with this little box down here. So the first color you're going to want to start with is like a light color, like a yellow. So get like a yellow. I'm just going to clear my page. I'll demo kind of like how to do this real quick. Maybe. If I can just, let me see if I can just clear this layer quick. Delete layer. Yes. Layer. New. So what the artist has done is they first get a very, very rough sketch with a very light color. They come in and do an intermediate detail sketch with a medium color. And then over top that is what they're actually tattooing with the black, where they're doing the finest detail. So it's kind of like a 3-stage sketch. A light color, intermediate, complexity, and intermediate color, and then final round of complexity, most detail. So what you're going to want to do is here we're going to do, everybody's going to have to do a skeleton with an AR-15. So you're going to open up a file, you're going to get a yellow, and you're going to make some sketch of your pose, get whatever your pose, right? And then over the top that, you're going to do a new layer for an intermediate sketch with a little bit darker color, probably the orange, and you're going to sketch that over top with intermediate detail. When you're satisfied with that, then you're going to do the final, what's called the line drawing, where you're going to finally switch back to the black and you're going to do the final line drawing. Okay. You're going to have 10 minutes to do this. Okay. Everybody ready? More instructions. What's confusing? Explain it again. Okay. So what, okay. So let me explain it again. What's happening here in that is this is 3 stages of the drawing. The first stage is a rough sketch with a light color. Very, very rough. That means you only spend a minute on it max. You're just getting the proportion and the pose. Does that make sense? Then you switch to a little bit darker color and you're adding a little bit of detail. So here they've added the fine lines of the teeth, the finer lines that are defining the eye, etc. And then the finest, most detail comes in over top that with the black. Does that make sense? So there should be 3 layers. No, it has to be a skeleton with an AR-15, which is a rifle. No, you get to choose the position, the pose, the emotion, etc. We're going to compare all our skeletons. We're going to build a skeleton army. Ready? Does that answer everybody's question? All right, here we go. So you're doing 3 sketches, each over top the other. You don't want to spend too much time on the first one. You're just getting out the proportion and the pose. Then you want to spend intermediate amount of time on the second one, adding a little bit more detail. Let's see. Seven minutes, actually 8 minutes. I'm switching to my orange over top drawing, my intermediate sketch. So the point is that at each stage where you're adding more detail, you're fixing the problems from the last layer. So you're not striving to erase everything and make it perfect. You're striving to draw over top and in each phase make it a little bit more detailed and a little bit more better, proportionally and accurately. All right, 5 minutes left. I'm switching to my black drawing over top. Final lines. Three minutes, 30 seconds. Two minutes. I want these skeletons looking good. You have 1 minute and 30 seconds left. Finish. $30. Upload it when you're done. Yeah, keep the layers. Don't merge it. Yeah. Let's see here. Did I not make a folder? Oh, it's the sketching light to dark folder. That's it. Okay. Done. Okay, while you guys are uploading those, a little bit more to talk about with respect to composition. So let's talk now about compositions. This assumes you kind of can draw a few things and you're thinking about, well, you want to arrange a piece. I think there are a few different types of compositions. The first, most simple type that I would recommend you focus on if you are not an expert drawer is the composition type that's sort of like just discrete items. You might see something like this if you walk into like a tattoo parlor, where you see these are called flash drawings, where you're just assembling discrete items that you know how to draw together. And if they're drawn in the same style, and you put them together, they tend to look good together. And so you can assemble a composition of just separate discrete items. So what I'm saying is that as you start this class, if you're not an expert drawer, I would recommend you start your compositions with something simple like this, where you're trying to just draw discrete items, which is why our first assignment is parts of a whole. Okay, that's the first kind of type of composition. Okay, second type of composition, one plane composition. So this is where, here's an example. Here is Albert Dürer drawing a composition, a complicated composition in that there's multiple different parts, but simple composition in that there's only one plane. So there's only one flat two-dimensional plane, and there's only one, essentially like one thing happening, okay? And the rest of the space is what's called negative space. So let me just define that. That's worth defining. Negative space in an artistic piece is the white space, and the positive space is where you're actually drawing elements. Note how in this beautiful drawing from this master, the negative space is balanced with the positive space. Okay, it's balanced. It feels somehow even. It feels symmetrical, like the yin and the yang. Okay, that's one thing that can contribute to a good composition, is a balancing of negative and positive space. And this is a simple example of one of the more simple types of compositions where you just have one plane of action. Okay. Then we'll go into the more complicated, okay, where you have, maybe if I can, multiple planes. Okay. So let's look at a more complicated Dürer image like this one. Okay. So in this one, you have multiple planes. You have probably 4 planes. I'll try to point out the planes that you have. You have the front plane, which is essentially the guy in the night and the horse that's up front, the dog's right underneath, and the ground. This is the first plane, okay? Then behind that, you have the horse behind, the skull, the demon, and then another demon right here. Okay, so there's a second plane behind that. Then there's a third plane. There's a third plane, which is some kind of a mountainous treescape on some kind of strange bush with trees. And then finally, you have a fourth plane behind, which is the furthest. If I can get different color. You have a fourth plane behind, which is here and the castle in the very, very, very far background. And then actually you probably have a fifth plane, which is essentially like just the sky, which just creates just a little bit of negative space. Okay. So this is a second type of composition, or maybe a third type of composition, actually. Again, what I'm telling you is that there are levels of difficulty. This is the simplest. This is a little bit more difficult. This is even more difficult, okay, having sort of like multiple planes. And then there is perspectivism, which is continuous infinite planes, which is essentially a continuous gradation of plane. Okay, this is perspectivism, where you're actually like going into three-dimensional space. So this would be probably the hardest type of drawing to do correctly, technical drawing. And then you have a final type of composition, which would be like abstract, which is kind of just trying to capture texture or emotion. Okay, so these are the types of compositions. We probably won't be doing too much abstract stuff, but feel free to tackle things that are like this, knowing that this is the easiest and this is the hardest. So just know, like, if you decide, oh, I'm going to try to do a composition of like three-dimensional space, you're trying to tackle like the hardest possible thing in drawing. So maybe don't try to do that on the first assignment. Maybe try to do something like this on the first assignment. Are there any questions about that? Question asked. So first let me ask, you don't see a difference between what and what? Okay. Yeah.
Understand that a composition you have more planes.
Yes.
I could draw like your shadow, is that what the composition is?
So okay, so I think you're kind of asking like, what do I mean by the word composition? What I mean is sort of like the arrangement of the whole piece, like the whole image, the whole frame that you're looking at, the arrangement of the things that you put in there. Yes, you're talking about texture, there's texture. Yes, there's shadows. But I'm talking about sort of like how you arrange things. Does that make sense? So we will actually have a whole challenge on texture. But I'm telling you, like, okay, so if you're an expert, you can add texture right away. But what I'm telling you is that you should think simple. And what do I want to say? Okay, so like, another way to say this is, let's make a list of the number of items in each of these images. How many items would you say are in this image? How many? Take a guess. Maybe, yeah, I mean, maybe something like 25. I guess okay, so in this, maybe, well, let's think about it. There's this instrument thing, there's a hat, there's horns, there's a tree, there's grass, there's shoes, uh, some kind of a belt thing, a sword maybe, hands. So if you actually itemize all these, it's probably equivalent, probably something like 25 items. And this is probably more. And so what I'm saying is, what I'm trying to tell you is like, you need to strategically design your composition in a way that is not trying to do something impossible when you start. Does that make sense? Yes. I mean, that's how I think of drawing. Like, to be able to do something very, very complicated, you have to be able to do simple things first. So, like, in order to be able to draw a horse, you have to be able to draw hair first, or you have to be able to draw a foot first, right? And so this is where you should start compositions like this, where you're just drawing items. That's the simplest form of a composition. Don't try to draw what you might, a different word for a composition might be like a scene. Don't try to draw a scene. Does that make sense? If you're not sort of like an expert. Maybe I'm not being clear, but what I'm in the simplest way, what I'm trying to do is don't tackle something that seems impossible. Okay. So for example, let me give an example. I've had many students that when they start, they want to do something underwater. So they try to do like a jellyfish. And the easiest, most simple way to do it would be just to do the jellyfish. Okay. But they're tempted to go further. They do the jellyfish and then they realize, oh, it's underwater. That means I have to do like coral. And that means I have to do rocks. And that means I have to do sharks behind and bubbles. Like you see how it just sort of inflates the complexity. Start simple. That's all I'm trying to say. And I'm trying to outline here a strategy of how you can do simple compositions versus much more complicated compositions. Does that make sense? Hopefully that makes sense. Maybe not. We'll find out when you do them. Okay, balance of negative and positive space. Everybody understood that? The other thing you're trying to do with a composition is you're trying to conduct the eye of the viewer. So when you draw a drawing, you're actually trying to point the viewer to look at certain things. You are deciding where to put the details, where the eye is going to be drawn to. So when I look at this image, the first thing I'm looking at is the guy's eyes. That's the first thing that I look at. Then I start to, for some reason, I go to the hands and then I go to the feet. Like that's how my eye is looking. And so you're realizing that a drawing is conducting the eye to look at different things. And it's your job as the artist to make the space interesting to look at. The whole point of making an image is it's something that you want somebody to actually look at. You don't want to make an image that they see and they want to look away. Like that's the whole point. Okay. Okay. So that's composition. Any final questions about composition? Maybe I did not address that very well, but the point is you usually want to organize your space. Okay. We're going to practice sketching a composition. So here's where I kind of get a little bit more to your point about shading. So some of the things that you do need to think about in a composition is you need to choose where the light source is. So let's look at some of these. This is a guy by the name of Dore, if I'm pronouncing it correct. He's famous for, in each of his images, there's always like one source of dramatic lighting. So obviously like the moon is right here. And that means that as the moon projects its rays, if you're drawing this, you think through, okay, it's projecting light this way. That means everything that's closest to the moon is light. Okay. So you see how the things that are actually being faced by the light source are right. Okay. And that means things that are away from the light source, like the back of these angels, are dark. Okay. So it seems stupid for me to say this, but people who have never drawn before, they don't even think of the concept of, well, where is my light source? And what parts should be light and what parts should be dark? And then what parts should be casting a shadow? So this guy is casting a shadow like this behind this horse or this dog, whatever, donkey, whatever this is, because the light is shining this way, brightening up the front, but projecting a shadow around the back. So as you do your composition, you need to actually think about if there is a light source, where the light source is, you should choose it. You should envision the shadows in your mind and draw those shadows. Okay. So if you want a demo real quick on how to do a shadow, all you need to do, I can do a shadow on my AR-15 skeleton. First, if you're going to do a shadow, let's pick a light source. Let's say the light source was coming this way. And let's say he's in front of the light source. Okay. So you can just grab black. Let's get a bigger brush and reduce the opacity so we'll have some gray. And you can actually just draw custom shadows. Shadows, even if they're rough, like rough shadows even look still like pretty cool. So here's a quick, very simple custom shadow. I mean, in 5 seconds. So just understand that when you do your composition, that's something you need to think about is where's the light source? How is it projecting? How is it creating shadows? Use grays, actually spend time to draw the shadows. So now we're going to try practicing sketching a composition. Now is where you get to practice and we get to see how people make compositions. So everybody should start with a blank page and you're going to have 10 minutes to not finalize a whole scene, but to sketch a scene, if that makes sense. So the goal is to sketch a scene. I'm going to clean this up quick before I do that. All right, I think we set 10 minutes for this. So here we go. Try to sketch a scene. Having a light source, having shadows, having multiple elements. And you'll realize the pain. A composition means that you're trying to fill the whole space. You're trying to fill this whole page. That's what it means. So again, your goal is to make the space interesting. If the space is not interesting, you fail. Not literally, but that's the challenge. So I'm trying to sketch out like where are my lights, where are my darks, where are my elements, what's going to be where. Where are the darkest points, where are the lightest points, where are the pure blacks. Three minutes and a half. So again, the point of doing this, as you're finishing up your 2.5 minutes, the point of doing this is when you make a composition, you don't sort of start at the bottom right and just sort of like draw the whole thing from bottom to top. You're doing a sketch of the whole layout. You're sketching, okay, this thing goes there, this thing goes there. The light source is here, so that means there's going to be a shadow here. That means there should be darks here. You're sketching out the whole space, the whole space. And then over top of that, you'd come in with like a real detailed drawing. Okay. So the point is don't try to draw with infinite detail in the first iteration in a tiny area and then sort of like expand a composition from a tiny area. You want to map out and plan the composition beforehand in a 5-minute sketch, 10-minute sketch, before you commit 10 hours to doing detail on something that is not a good composition. That's a very common problem is people who can draw detail. They might be able to draw detail, but they can't make an interesting composition because they don't ever even bother to think about what's the composition going to look like. So I hope that that clarifies a little bit. 1 minute left. This would be saved in the composition sketch. 20 seconds. All right. So wrap that one up and upload it wherever you are at. Okay, now I want to talk about drawing techniques. Okay, so first drawing technique is the crosshatch. So here's a good little picture of how you do crosshatching. So these are different, what I'm teaching you is different ways to do shading. So we all know that drawing has lines, right? Let's say you make an apple, something like this, okay? But then to add shading, there's different techniques to add shading, okay? So crosshatch is when you're adding lines, parallel lines, like this. You're deciding where is the dark spots. So the lights up here coming this way. Where are the darkest spots? And then you're doing consistent cross hatching in those darkest spots. And in the darkest spots, you're adding the most sort of hatches, something like this. So that's a very simple, and then if I were to add a shadow, be something like this. Right? So there's a quick demo of some nasty cross hatching. But cross hatching is a very powerful technique. Okay, so Robert Crumb is probably the best cross hatcher of all time. So if you want to learn how to do good cross hatching, look at Robert Crumb. So this is an example of kind of like the level of detail that you can capture with just simple cross hatching, black and white. Okay. Do we have a cross? I don't think. Are we going to do cross hatching? Yeah. Okay. So we'll do a cross hatch demo. You get 10 minutes. So pick some kind of object, any kind of object that you want to draw that you like, and spend 10 minutes trying to make a very nice looking crosshatch drawing of that object. Okay. That's the next one. Are people like feeling good about the speed, or are they like ridiculously frustrated? Anxious? Well, so that's something you think about. I'll say, yeah, I know how you feel. You want to do well, but this is all just sketching. Like that's what we're practicing right now. We're practicing sketching. Okay, sketching should not be perfection. So just keep that in mind. What you want to get good at is sloppy drawing real quickly as a sketch. Okay, so crosshatch, anything you want. Somebody give me something challenging. What should I crosshatch? Anything? A dog. That's hard. Okay. Uh, okay. Here we go. And
Medium is Ed.
pick it up. All right, here we go. Oh, he's so cute. Okay, here we go. So one of the reasons we do this, practicing these different techniques, is because some of these you're going to feel more comfortable with, and some of these you're going to feel less comfortable with. So it's a good way to help you sort of identify what are some of your strengths that you can exploit, and what are some of your weaknesses that need to be worked on. And also to teach you that there are many different ways to draw. Halfway done. 5 minutes left. Goes quick. You're trying to look for where those lights and those darks are. This is what this is teaching you to see. This is what I mean by observing. You actually have to look at each square inch of the creature or thing to actually be able to draw it. Difficult. 1 minute. $30 seconds. All right, save what you got. Not bad. That's it. All right, that's crosshatch. Okay, stippling or pointillism. So pointillism is where you're doing dots like this. Whether consistently or inconsistently, the level of density of the dots creates the image. Now, what I will say that's different about Photoshop, you should not ever create a Photoshop image where you are individually doing each dot. That is a waste of time. That's a waste of the mechanics of Photoshop. You can create brushes that essentially will do multiple dots at the same time. So we might not do that today because it's the introduction. But just so you know, like you can create and you can find brushes that will put in like 10 dots. Oh, that's weird. 10 dots or 20 dots or 50 dots per point. So you should never in Photoshop be doing like individual dots, although we might a little bit today. Okay, so here are just some examples. So pointillism is a real easy way to get good texture, and it works well for insects. So here's a good insect. Here's a scene. So the next thing that we're going to practice or attempt is 10 minutes, anything you want, of pointillism. So you can set up your file. What should I do? What do you guys want me to do or try? Give me something. A tractor. Got it. That'll be fun. All right. 10 minutes. Pointillism. Go for it. Moved. 7 minutes. Like torture. 5 minutes. 3 minutes. All right. Not bad. That pointillism takes a very long time. So save those, upload them. If you're tired, that's because this is the boot camp. I think we have just 2 more exercises left. Okay, so the next concept of shading, in contrast to the cross-hatching and the stippling, called the gray wash. So this is like drawings with India ink where you can do washes of grays. Okay. This we can also do in Photoshop. So a good example of this is Charles Adams, who did the Adams family. He's very, very, very good at gray washes. So if you're interested in looking for good gray washes, you can look at Charles Adams. Again, the concept is you're not trying to finish everything in the picture with lines. You're leaving lots of space to be filled with gray washes. Okay, so you're leaving lots of negative space in the initial draft to fill later with gray washes. Okay, so the way that you can implement this in Photoshop is, again, what I do is I take a brush, I set it to black, and I turn the opacity to something low, like 16%, and you'll realize that you can brush different shades of gray over top of each other progressively. Okay. So before you start this quick, just make sure that you are capable of getting a brush, setting the opacity low, and being able to kind of do gray washes. And the way that I would approach this practice is I would first do a little sketch, and then I would try to do some gray washes in. Okay, so for this, we have 10 minutes of whatever you want. Yeah. The last one should be uploaded to the stipple folder right here, stipple, that one. And then this one will be uploaded to the gray wash folder. Okay, so go for it. What should I do? Gray wash. Any suggestions? A pair of jeans. That's a good, okay. That's interesting. Mm. All right, 10 minutes. Here you go. That's a good pick for a gray wash. Just you're really training your eye to see the shades of gray. What I would encourage you to do is after you feel like you've got some gray, pull out your eraser and come back and do some highlights. That will really make it look quite good. Two and a half minutes. You can also change the opacity on your eraser. So you can come back in with your eraser and you can lighten up certain parts and not go all the way to 0. One and a half minutes. All right, that's it. Getting close to the end here of the initial boot camp. Okay. Next thing about drawing, the revision process. So as you do drawings, you're going to be faced with a conundrum of, are you done with the drawing or should you keep going? And you're going to constantly be wondering about that. Okay, you're going to ask yourself, am I done? What you should do is you should look at the drawing and you should ask yourself, are there any areas of the drawing that you are not satisfied with? Okay, if there are areas of the drawing that you are not satisfied with, then you're not done. And you should progressively not be afraid to erase the areas that are ugly to you. So if here's your drawing, here's your composition. Let's say you have something that looks like this, and you decide, well, I like this. Oh, you decide, well, I like this part here, but I don't like this part. Okay, you need to actually go in and erase this part and then try again. You try again, have some different marks, and you decide, okay, I still don't like that. You need to erase it all and try again. Keep doing this over and over and over until you reach the point where you say, yes, I like this part, and yes, I like this part. Okay, that's how you decide if you're done. So you cannot be afraid to erase. You need to erase. Ask what you like, what you don't like. Reposition things. So repositioning might mean that you are, if you're in Photoshop, you might need to take a piece of it, say, oh, well, I like this part, but it doesn't go there. It should actually, hang on. It should actually go over here. So in Photoshop, you can actually reposition things, okay? So that might be a common thing where you might say, well, I like this top part and I like this bottom part, but this should not be over here. So then you grab it and you move it, but it should be over here, etc. You can reposition things. You can resketch, okay? So sometimes I'll do a few sketches. So sometimes I'll do sketch 1, 2, 3, and I'll decide which of these I like best. Let's say I like this one the best. Then I'll do that one. Okay, so you can sketch, you can resketch. Don't be afraid to sketch something out multiple times, 5 to 10 times even. Doing sketches, 5-minute sketches or 1-minute sketches 10 times will be extremely valuable to you as opposed to just embarking on a 5-hour like project, okay? You need to sketch. Attempt perfection. So what I mean by that is not everything you do is going to be perfect, but if there are still areas of the drawing that you are not satisfied with, then you're not done and you should try to continue. You should try to reach a point where you are satisfied with every part of that image. Okay, so that's how you decide if you are done or not. All right, wrapping it up here. Note that there are many different styles. We've learned many different techniques on how to draw. We learned about sketching, we learned about shading, we learned about cross-hatching, stippling, gray washing. There's many different ways to combine these together. And as you combine these together and as you sort of like learn how your brain thinks about lines and your brain thinks about objects, you'll realize that you actually have your own unique style. Everybody's drawings look a little bit different. Everybody's brain and neuroanatomy is a little bit different, and that comes out in the drawings. So I have just here some examples of some different drawing styles, and you'll be able to see how people have different ways of drawing. So here is, this is Otto Dix. So this is lots of, if I was to analyze this style, lots of scratchiness, lots of cross-hatching. He's leaving good negative space, occupying good positive space, not afraid to get perfect proportion, not focus too much on the proportion, but rather letting sort of the sloppiness of the image be nice to the viewer, if that makes sense. Not afraid to be sloppy. Here is Rembrandt. Rembrandt is similar to Otto Dix in the sense that not afraid to sort of use scratchy, sloppy lines, but much more perfectionist about proportion and where things are at and spacing and form. So almost essentially perfect form, but with scratchy lines. That's Rembrandt. This is Hokusai again. His modus operandi is essentially, how do I draw the most detailed image with the fewest amount of lines? So what he's constantly trying to do, for example, here's a person, I think, wearing some interesting Japanese kimono. It's only a few lines. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 lines. So he's trying to sort of simplify everything, get the base essence with the fewest amount of lines. Very interesting style. Here's Dürer again. These are actually etchings. So these are actually like engraved on a copper plate. So he's actually doing this under probably some form of a ancient microscope, probably, or looking very, very, very close to the drawing. So what Durr is doing is essentially using the finest lines you can possibly imagine and drawing it almost like a microscopic level to get this level of detail, and then just layering and layering and layering infinitesimal cross-hatching to get this type of image. Let's see. Here is Frank Miller, comic book artist, uses lots of big chunks of black, okay? And not afraid to be sloppy, not afraid to kind of have randomness. So he's injecting randomness into the drawing, not necessarily having to have a perfect position of every mark, and having a very, very good balance of negative space and positive space, okay? Here is Mike Mignola. This is the guy who did Hellboy, similar to Frank Miller, but a little bit more smoother, a little bit not as much randomness, and the line smoothing is real high. So here's a good example of somebody who's probably drawing with some kind of like a smoothing technique where his lines are very smooth. Here's H.R. Geiger. This is the artist who was the inspiration for all the Alien movies. Okay, lots of black and white, but sort of like infinite sort of gradations of gray. Many grays with no lines whatsoever. So here's a image where there literally isn't like an actual like line drawn. It's more so just sort of infinite gradations of gray that create these lines, which makes it look perfect in a sense of its smoothness. Here is Kathy Kollwitz. So this is actually a woodcut. So it's not actually a drawing, but it's an interesting style, in some sense similar to Frank Miller. And I like showing this because you can draw this way. So what's actually happening here is, or the way to draw this is to make big chunks of black and then chunk out white pieces with an eraser. So that when you do a woodcut, you're actually starting with a black surface and you're carving out the white. So you can do that with drawing too. You can color the image black and then you can use an eraser to chunk out white parts. So it's almost like drawing in the reverse. Different style that produces a totally different type of image. And then here is Katsuhiro Otomo, who did Akira, the Akira manga, using halftones. So this is like comic book artist. Halftones is like where you have infinite dots that are evenly spaced to create these different grays with lines, and just incredible detail. So just understand, I show these because I want you to understand, one, there are many different ways to draw, and you're going to realize that you have kind of like your own way of drawing, and what you need to do in this class is realize what you're good at and try to emphasize that. And realize what you're bad at and also try to exploit that for sometimes what you're bad at can also create interesting images. And then what was the other thing I was going to say? Oh, the other reason I show this is to show you how much you can accomplish with no color whatsoever. Okay. I love drawing in black and white. I prefer to draw in black and white because you can accomplish just as much in an image. You don't even need color. And the point of the first 3 weeks of the class is to learn and develop your black and white skills to the point where you don't even need color. And then we add in the color after about 3 weeks. Okay. Okay. So that is a demo that there are multiple different drawing styles. Your activity for the next 20 minutes, and this is the last activity, is you are going to draw an item in 2 different styles. So you're going to pick an artist you like, and you're going to try to draw in 2 different styles the same item. Okay? So that's the next activity. You get 10 minutes for each drawing. That's 20 minutes. If you want to take a little break, you could take a little break, or if we prefer, after 20 minutes, we can take a longer break. Okay. I'll just start it then. What's an item for me? Anybody got a good idea? Good challenge? A dragon. Okay. don't have two files. You could do the first part on the top half and the bottom part on the bottom half. Have one file. hope everybody also knows that you can zoom in and out. So down here on the bottom left, there's the percentage. You can increase the percentage, which allows you to zoom in. So you can do more detail if you want, zoomed in. And you can zoom out. So often I'm changing the perspective. All right, that's it. Save it. Upload it. Okay, hang on. I'm going to stop the recording.